Hey guys, MC Stu here. Today we're going to go over a budget phaser build that is made up primarily of mission drops and also exchange items. Stay tuned. Just some quick housekeeping. Make sure to check out the Discord server. We do have a giveaway going this month for a ring of 10 master keys. Also, consider becoming a member of the channel. Help support make additional content and comes with some pretty nice perks as well. You click on the join button below and take a look at that. Do appreciate your consideration whether you do sign up or not. Let's go ahead and jump into the video here, guys. So today we're going to be taking a look at a build that's made up primarily of mission rewards and exchange items. Fairly easy things to get as long as you're grinding out your EC, doing the tour of the galaxy and other methods there. It's not a real expensive build by any means, but there are a few items from the exchange and from crafting. So depending on where you're at in your crafting levels there, some of these may be easier just to get from the exchange, or maybe just ask a friend or general chat to make you some. Some of these are pretty easy to do. You may just have to upgrade them a little bit. Let's go ahead and jump right into it here, guys. All right, so here we go. So as you can see, it's basic phaser beam overload build. We're just going to go ahead and just jump into the gear, go through where each of these come from. Also, I am happy to announce on this, per popular demand, I will have a text written version of all the gear on this build and the bridge officer seating. On the bridge officer seating, the way I wrote that out is just going to be prioritizing particular abilities. It's not going to go through every single seat, as your seating can differ depending on the ship that you're building this on. So I've just detailed in the written description what items you need to have and which ranks of those items you need to prioritize. The rest you can just fill in with what you have. So I'll have a link down in the description that'll take you to my site, which is mcstu.live, and that will have a text version of all the gear that's on here, as well as the bridge officer seating. For the traits, I did not include that in the text version because that's also going to vary greatly depending on what you have available to you. We will go over that in the video today. So if you prefer the text version, definitely check that out as well. I'll go obviously into detail in the video. The text is just going to have a list of the items and what missions you get those items from. All right, so let's take a look at the build here. First item we have is the Quantum Phase Beam Array. This is going to come from the mission Sunrise. It is a part of a 3-piece set, and what we'll do is we'll kind of jump around here so we can see what comes from where as these sets pertain to each other. So we're using the Beam Array. We're using the torpedo up front from the same mission drop, and then we are also using the console. Let's take a look at the 3-piece, and then we'll look at the items individually here. All right, so the 2-piece is going to give you additional accuracy, and it's going to double the potential for the Quantum Phase weapon shield drain. It's going to double the potential for the Quantum Phase high yield torpedo shield heal. So accuracy's nice, not a huge deal, and doubling the potential of the procs on these weapons is always nice. So 2-piece, not bad there at all. The 3-piece does something pretty cool. It actually gives you a clicky that allows you to fire a beam out of the deflector. It looks really cool. It's reminiscent of the special weapon they put together in the Next Generation when they were fighting the Borg. The one that ended up not working because they had captured Captain Picard and he had alerted them to the plan that they were going to use, but it looks very similar to that. And what this does is it's going to give phaser damage. On the way that this build is set up, it's giving 2,658 phaser damage per second for 10 seconds. It also drains energy from the enemy and gives it to you. So 2.7 all power subsystems per second for 10 seconds. So essentially, it's going to end up boosting your power by 27 over that 10-second duration as that is going. And that whole time, that beam is just shooting out of your ship and hitting the enemy. Again, looks very cool. So nice little 3-piece there. All 3 of these come from the mission Sunrise. It's a pretty easy mission to run. It's kind of a fun mission as well, but definitely going to want this set here. The console, and we'll just jump down to this here. This is going to give you phaser damage, which obviously is boosting the build energy type for 26.3. This is fully upgraded. It's going to be a little bit lower than that when you get it stock at Mark 12. It's going to give you additional auxiliary power, and it's going to give you some points into Drain. Drain's not a big part of this build, other than the fact that the 3-piece on this is basically a drain effect. So it's giving the the phaser damage when you click that, and that's this button here. It's giving you drain because it's taking energy from the enemy and giving it to yourself. So that's essentially what drain is, and then it's also giving you that phaser damage to the enemy. So that's the 3-piece for the quantum phase set. I'm using, and we'll just kind of jump to cover all of these here. So these are just crafted beam arrays. I could not find a mission that drops phaser beam arrays. If you're aware of one, put that down in the comments and I'll update the text list. But I went through each one and was unable to find beam arrays. I have been able to find basically everything else, but not phaser beam arrays where we could just rerun the mission and get what we needed. So these, I crafted, I want to say 2 of them, and then I bought the other 2 off the exchange at Mark 12. They were about 500,000 EC. But you can craft these and then upgrade them. Even if you're a lower level on this crafting school, you could make lower level ones and then get Phoenix boxes and upgrade them, which I would definitely recommend doing. But that's where these 4 phasers come from. So these are crafted phasers, and you could use anything you want here. So if you're browsing through the exchange and you're seeing some other type of phaser beam arrays, grab anything that you like. You can get phaser beam arrays from loot drops. It's kind of rare to get these very rare ones. But you can get blue and greens. And in the meanwhile, if you are picking those up from loot drops, throw them in until you're able to get better quality ones or upgrade the ones that you have picked up. All right, space set. We are using the Bajor Defense Deflector, and I'm using that in conjunction with the shield. So the deflector isn't really doing a ton for us. It's giving us some drain, which helps the 3-piece clicky on here. I did not do that intentionally or build around that. That would be going down kind of a rabbit hole. There's nothing really in here. I mean, you get a little bit of shield cap, but that's not a big deal for me. The reason that it's here is to get the 2-piece from that and from the shield. The shield's pretty decent, but again, the 2-piece is going to give us I don't want to upgrade. I want to look at details. It's going to give us a plus 19% phaser damage. This 2-piece set also works on Disruptor and on Plasma builds. So you'll see this set being repeated on some of the next videos that I'm going to do. They're going to cover Disruptor. So Bajor set, 2-piece is all you really need from that, and that is going to give you the extra phaser boost. This comes from, and I'm going to show you where it comes from because for the life of me, I am unable to sound out those words. But it's going to come from the New Frontiers arc, and it's going to come from this mission right here. And again, I'm not going to even embarrass myself with trying to sound that out. So here's the mission here. It's in the text as well. And you can see this is part of a 3-piece set. You could go, and use the engine. The engine's pretty good, and the shield. I just decided to use the combination the way that I did because I wanted to use the Soul Defense engine because of the proc that it has. So when you're taking directed energy weapons damage, you have a 25% chance for plus 4% turn rate and some additional defense rating for 15 seconds. This effect, stacks up to 5 times. If you are taking more damage, you could go with this 2-piece and maybe so go with the shield from this and the engine. Instead of taking the phaser boost from the 2-piece, you could go with the soul defense 2-piece set, and that's going to give you a huge boost to your not defense, your resistance ratings. So kinetic and energy plus 35 and plus 25. So this is a really, really nice set. If you're having trouble just dying way too much, you may want to start with using the 2-piece from this mission here. And this comes from the Soul Defense, comes from the mission Midnight. So it's the last episode in the Iconian arc. I wasn't having too much problem dying in this build, so I went the damage route with the 2-piece from the Bajoran set, as opposed to needing more survivability and going with the 2-piece from the Soul Defense set. That's an option as well. Both of these sets are going to come from mission drops, easy to get, fun missions to play as well. So that's the engine we're using. Next, I'm using a crafted warp core. It is a deuterium stabilized warp core. This is here for the negative 15% weapons power cost. So every time we're using our weapon, especially at the beam overload, it's wanting to draw quite a bit of weapons power from that. And this is helping reduce that. And that's the main reason that this is here. Rear weapons, we have the crafted phasers. I'm using the trilithium omnidirectional, and this comes from Beyond the Nexus, from the New Frontiers arc as well. I'm using it with the console set, and so what this is doing is this is giving us additional fire cycle haste. 2-piece, so we're getting plus 5% fire cycle weapons haste. It's also giving us additional flight speed, and this is for all your weapons, not just that one weapon. You'll also see by itself, it also has a proc of 2.5% to gain 10% fire cycle haste for all of your weapons for 15 seconds, which again, with beam overload is awesome. If you can get this to proc, that is huge. I mean, it's basically 10% more. It's more than 10% more. It's like a Cat 2 bonus almost, because you're firing that weapon 10% more in a beam overload standpoint. I mean, that's just big, and it makes a huge difference. And that brings me to why I have a turret in the back, which doesn't make a lot of sense really. But this is a part of the trilithium set as well. This is not giving us the 3-piece bonus. Basically, these two weapons are interchangeable in terms of that of making the 3-piece bonus, which 3-piece bonus isn't really valuable to us on this build. But the reason I have this here instead of another phaser is because this also has that same proc. So as this is firing, it has a 2.5% chance to give us 10% fire cycling haste as well. And I parsed this build a couple times, and this is doing just as much damage as these beam arrays are. If you compare them directly, it does less, but because it's basically omnidirectional, it's being able to be on target more than everything else is just on average, and so it's doing the same amount of damage as what the beam arrays are doing, and it's giving you a whole nother chance to get that firing cycle haste proc off. And that's why we have this here. Which brings me to bridge officer stations. Like I said, in the text version, I just put the ones you need to have for the build, prioritize those for rank, but you're going to be left over with extra stuff. I didn't do it in this one, but you could also, if you needed to fill in gaps, put in cannon rapid fire or something like that. I'd probably stay away from scatter volley, just so you don't, attract extra attention that you don't want to be threat-wise from hitting multiple targets at once. That's up to you, but that's something that you could fill in gaps where, if you did have extra tactical seating that you needed to, you could get a little more out of this by having one of those firing modes. It's not a must. I don't on this ship, so just a suggestion if you need to fill in some gaps there. Okay, for devices, we have the subspace field modulator. When I click this is giving me additional resistance. So it's not a heal, but it's slow down the amount of damage I'm taking so I can finish destroying the enemy or get away before I die. using the Kobayashi Maru. This came from an event. You may or may not have access to this depending on if you ran the event, but this is a nice little extra here. It calls in, actually I can do it here. So it calls in the Kobayashi Maru, and it's going to start throwing out heals and buffs to me. That'll last a certain amount of time there. It's kind of a nice little ability. I think it also fights a little bit. I don't know that it does much in the way of damage. I know the enemy will target it and destroy it. So that's a thing as well. We have the surplus, the Duranium surplus. This is basically a speed boost clicky. And then we're using batteries, energy amplifiers for the extra 20% bonus energy weapons damage. All right, so let's look at engineering consoles. We talked about the trilithium set. So passively, aside from the set bonus that we're getting from this is going to give us additional power transfer rate. It's going to give us additional hull, and it's going to give us additional hull regeneration. So regeneration and cap. This is helping Tyler's duality, which we'll get to when we look at the traits. So it's helping us get additional crit chance, and it's giving us additional survivability. And again, this trilithium set comes from Beyond the Nexus. All right, next we have the Tritium D. This is basically a survival console. This console is excellent. It's giving us additional damage resistance. This is also giving us maximum shield capacity, which again is not a huge deal to me, and it's also giving us hull capacity, which again survivability, and giving us more out of the Tyler's duality reputation space trait, which is nice. This is also giving us additional auxiliary power, and this is going to come from the mission Ragnarok. Now, these next two items, in the written one, I ran this build twice or a few times, but I was actually using two exchange items here, which I'll have in the written version of it. And let me just I'll switch over so we can take a look at what those were. And I found that it parsed about the same on average with or without them. I think if I practiced the piloting on this particular ship, we could probably do a little bit better, but I'll just go over what I use from the exchange items as an option. But the run that I'm going to post is going to have just the mission drops. So the computer-assisted flight algorithms, this is going to give you additional flanking damage, flight speed, and turn rate. The clicky on it, what it's going to do is for 30 seconds while this is running, non-flanking weapons attack against your primary target, you're going to gain plus 20 damage resistance, and you're going to gain plus 40 speed and 100% turn rate. So while this is running, if you're not flanking, you're getting basically defensive maneuvering. And if you are flanking, it is going to give you 30% additional damage and reduce the ability's recharge time. So if you're popping this as you're getting into a flanking position on something, especially like a boss or something like that, you're going to get a 30% damage boost, and it's going to recharge itself extremely fast. For every hit that you're putting in, you're going to get half a second off. So you're going to find if you're timing this out right on things to be using it in that flanking position, you're going to have this ability up quite a bit from this console. So this is a nice little console. I want to say this runs somewhere a little bit under 10 million on the exchange. This next exchange item is Approaching Agony. This is an excellent console. The passives on it are very good. Again, this is right in the same price point, so just under 10 million, and that can vary from day to day. Sometimes you can find it cheaper, sometimes it's a little bit more. This is going to give us 15% phaser damage, and it's giving us plus 1.5 critical chance. The clicky on it is going to give an area of effect. What it does is it's kind of like the Agony field on ground. So you're going to launch that out, and it's going to hit the target. It's going to control. Let me see. Are these extra? Okay, so there's a couple different. So leash, the bottom one is a chance, and I think I have some other things affecting this. But the main thing that we're looking at that we want out of this is the Approaching Agony, which is the middle one there. And that's going to give us phaser damage, 1,069.9 phaser damage every half second, negative 25% all damage resistance rating to targets, 25% chance to disable the target. So it's basically does a phaser damage over time and an all damage debuff. So if you throw this on, again, a boss or maybe a group of ships, because it does have an area of effect on it, this will debuff the enemy very nicely while doing damage to them. And if you're in a phaser build on top of that, it just complements the whole package. So that this is, and then the passives are great too. So for the amount of money that this costs, this is an excellent console. Again, on the Parse run that I'm going to show, I did stick with the mission drop items. So we're going to switch back over to that and take a look at those. I do have those exchange items listed as in the text version, with these items listed as alternatives and where to get them from. Okay, so next item is going to be the House Martok defensive configuration. This is here for the flight turn rate and for the survivability aspects. So this is going to give us 13% plus maximum hit points. So again, helping Tyler's duality and our survivability. This is going to give us shield power, engine power, and maximum shield cap, as well as some nice little boost to the flight turn rate, which is very nice. Next, we have the Polaric Modulator. This is from Delta Flight. Oh, and this console here, House Martok, this comes from... what does it come from? I have it in my list here. Brushfire. House Martok. Okay, yeah. So this comes from the mission Brushfires, where you can get the House Martok defensive configuration console from. Next item is the Polaric Modulator. This comes from Delta Flight, and this is giving us +5 inertia, +12 flight speed, 20% turn rate, and then this is also giving us some boosts for slipstream, which isn't really a big deal here. And then it's adding 7.5% of our weapons power to our engine's power, which is giving us better maneuverability on this build as well. Okay, next let's take a look at our science consoles. So the next item here is going to be the Temporal Shield Data Core. This comes from the mission Temporal Reckoning. This is going to give us a good amount of survivability. So it's going to give us plus 52.5% physical damage resistance, 35% kinetic damage resistance, which is always nice, especially if you're fighting the Borg or some of the other enemies in the game. That always seems to be one that everyone kind of lacks for some reason. So this really helps quite a bit with that. And then the other boosts are more of something that you would use on an exotic or control build. So it's boosting EPG and control by 26.3%. And this is something that you will find on my budget science build. So nice little console, adds some additional resistance survivability. We discussed the quantum phase converter. And this is giving us essentially here for the phaser damage and auxiliary power drain. Not as big of a deal, although it does help boost the 3-piece console set. And again, this one comes from not Beyond the Nexus, it comes from Sunrise. Next, we have the Temporal Disentanglement Suite. This is here for the critical chance and critical severity. That scales off of the amount of auxiliary power that you have. So my auxiliary power is set fairly low, but this console is boosting that auxiliary power, and so is this console here. So I'm still getting I'm almost at 50 on this. So I'm getting about half of what this console has to offer, which is still enough to go ahead and slot it. So I'm getting about 5% critical severity and somewhere around 1.5 critical chance. It doesn't say on here, you have to pull it off and look at the difference, but it's definitely worth having on there. It's also giving us a boost to our maximum shield capacity as well, and 3% shield resistance. So a little bit of survivability and a decent amount of critical chance and severity coming from this that could scale up if I took some power out of my engines. But for me, the trade-off of being a little bit faster is more beneficial than having that extra critical chance. That really depends on your play style. If that's not as big of a deal to you, or you're getting some other flight speed from somewhere else, or your modifier on the particular ship that you're using, you may want to put a little bit more into the auxiliary power and get a little bit more out of this console. All right, and lastly, we have tactical consoles. These you can get from the mission. Let's see, I wrote it down here. Signs and portents. And that is going to be from, I believe that's also from the New Frontiers. Let's just take a look here. Yes, right here. So if you run this mission a few times, you can pick up these phaser consoles. You can also craft these. You can also buy these off the exchange. So you have quite a few options in order to pick these up and build out the tactical slots with these. Obviously, this whole build of gear is a starting point, right? So if you're saying, you know what, I want to do phaser damage and I want to do beam overload or whatever it may be. If you were going to do, eventually do a tank, a lot of this stuff you could use at least until you get into that higher level. But if you watch the next video to this, which is already posted in the advanced builds, there's a beam overload video. You would start with this as a new player, somebody building out your ship. Maybe you started off doing disruptor or something totally different, right? So you could start off with this ship and then slowly work your way to the advanced level of this build, which is posted on the channel there on the playlist, advanced builds. So this would be basically a predecessor of what you would start with and then slowly kind of change some of these things out in order to get up to that next level. So all of this stuff is extremely easy to obtain. I was pretty surprised. It did pretty decent in the Parse run, which we'll take a look at in just a minute here. But let's go ahead and take a look at the skills and then the seating. So I'm using my standard skill tree here. Heavy tactical. This one, I have this character set up to be able to tank and do EPG as well as tactical. So it's going to be kind of a weird one. This may not be exactly what you want to copy. You might want to look up like Augie's catch-all. I think his catch-all looks probably a little better than my catch-all, but this is what I like to do here. So you can copy that if you'd like. Again, this kind of spreads things around a little bit, but it works for me. So specialization, we're using strategist and intelligence intel for our specializations. Let's go ahead and take a peek at the traits here. So most of these traits are stock ones or mission drops for your personal space traits. A few of these are off the exchange. So let's just take a look here. We are using Fleet Coordinator. This is giving us additional bonus damage for the amount of teammates that we have, including ourselves. We have Operative, and this is giving us +1 and +2 critical chance, critical severity. Again, these are all stock traits. We are using Beam Training, another stock trait, +5% bonus damage for beam weapon damage. We are using Innocuous. This is giving us +5% critical severity, and this is helping reduce our threat. So again, a lot of the survivability I focus on is threat reduction and resistance, the ability to not be targeted, drop threat, hide yourself. So these are real important to me to be able to have reduced threat generation. We're using Point Blank Shot. This comes from House Peck, which is a mission in the Iconian arc. And what this is going to do is this is going to give us additional bonus damage depending on how close we are to the enemy target. So basically, if you're in between 2 kilometers and 6 kilometers, it's going to scale from 0. If you're at 7 kilometers, you're at 0. If you get to 6 kilometers, you're going to be getting 1. And once you get up to 2 kilometers close, any closer is not going to give you any more. You'll be at the maximum of the 10% bonus damage. So nice little trait to have in there. And it's free, which makes it nice. And then I'm using the Kinetic Precision. This is giving us an additional 10% projectile shield penetration. Since we have a torpedo in the front, I didn't have much else to work with on that, so I decided to go ahead with this one. For the exchange or lockbox traits, I have Into the Breach, and this is giving us debuff for nearby enemies when we defeat an enemy. We're using Terran Targeting. This is an excellent trait. This is giving us a big old plus 15% critical severity. And then I'm using Context is for Kings. Again, I didn't put any of these in the written text version of it because this is just going to vary all over the place depending on what you've picked up and, you know, what missions you've ran and things like that. So as for the stock traits, this is what I would prioritize. If you had the beam version of this, so this one here comes from getting to level 15 in your crafting system. Same with like this one here. This comes from getting to level 15 in your science crafting. If you have level 15 in your beam crafting, use the one that unlocks from that instead of the torpedo one, because this isn't a torpedo build, this is a beam build. So if I had the beam one, I would put that in. So the personal space trait that unlocks at level 15 from your crafting system for beams, use that instead. I just don't have it. That's why this is slotted here. Let's take a look at the starship traits. Again, this isn't included in the text either because this is going to vary greatly. The only two that I have on this free-to-play account from my top 4 C-Store ships are going to be the emergency weapons cycle, and this is giving us a huge reduction to weapons power cost as well as a nice boost to your weapons firing haste, so 20%, which is very nice. Next is another one off that same list, and these are the only 2 ships I have or traits I have off that list, but working on getting the rest. Strike from Shadows, and this is going to give us a very nice threat reduction of 60%. It's going to give us plus 5% critical chance, which is awesome, and this is also going to give us a plus 5 bonus all damage, and this is when we are damaging enemies that do not have us targeted. All right, next we have Automated Shield Alignment. This came off an event ship, I want to say last year's event ship for the anniversary. Not this one that just passed, but the one prior to that. And what this is doing is giving us bonus damage based on how low our shields are getting. So if you're getting beat up a little bit, this is going to give you a nice little damage boost. It's also going to restore shields once you stack up enough of this effect. This kind of works well for me because I don't focus much on shields at all. So my shield's power is low. I don't put much into that. So I don't put any into that in the skill tree. So it's generally pretty normal for me. I rely on resistance and threat reduction, whole capacity. So my shields tend to be low a lot or down. So with that happening, I'm getting this bonus quite a bit. And then next I have History Will Remember. This is more of a tanking trait, but it's all I had. I'm not using the threatening stance, so I'm not getting that portion of this. But as I'm taking damage, I'm building up all damage and hull regeneration. I'm also building up maximum hull, which is going to help the Tyler's duality, which we'll get to here in just a moment. So again, some of these are just what I have. So these two, on my paid account, these two would be on there for sure. These are, quote unquote meta traits or best in slot traits for this build. These two help the build a little bit, but they're here because I don't have much else. You could also run, and I believe actually my loadout's got a little messed up, but I believe I was running in that build this here. Yes, I was. Instead of that. So this comes from this intel. This comes from Strategist. When you complete the Strategist specialization, you'll unlock this trait here. And this is Improve Unconventional Tactics. And what it does is it gives you 20% bonus all damage for 15 seconds when you activate Go Down Fighting, or I'm sorry, Brace for Impact. That's why I have Brace for Impact in the spam bar here, because that's a very nice boost. This is something that is free. You can just unlock it, and the cooldown is not super long on it either. It's a minute, so that's really not bad. I mean, it's as long as a battery. So another nice little boost. It's basically turns it into a second battery. So right now, I mean, we're running double, almost 40% bonus damage on on just by clicking those two abilities. So definitely want to go with that. All right, let's look at our space reputation traits. So we are using advanced targeting systems for the extra plus 20% critical severity. We are using precision, which is giving us plus 5 critical chance. We are using auxiliary power configuration, offense version of that. So based on where our auxiliary power is at, we're getting additional bonus damage, all damage. So with where I have mine currently, that's giving me a plus 3.4% all damage. It's giving us some accuracy as well, which isn't a big deal. But if you don't care about having as much power in engines like I do, you can get more out of this trait, just like with the science console that we're using, the temporal entanglement suite. So you can definitely get a little bit more in the way out of these. I just find that for me, I get more damage by being where I need to be quicker than I do by just having this raw damage here. Because if I have, a whole bunch, let's say I cranked this up and I cranked my movement down, and I don't want to get all into that again. I made a whole video on it, but I could crank all this stuff up and get a ton more damage out of this and that console that I have. But if I'm not there to shoot the enemy, then it really doesn't make any difference whatsoever. So in any case, I'm just doing this balancing kind of act and still getting something out of it. Next, we're using magnified firepower, rank 2, and this is giving us a plus 6.3% bonus weapons damage. And then Tyler's duality, this is scaling with the hit points on our ship. A maximum of 200 hit points will get you an extra 7.5 critical chance. I'm getting 4.5 critical chance out of it at my current whole number of hit points that I have. So this stuff's pretty standard. You're going to see a lot of this just vary slightly depending on what the build is. But these are really kind of your go-to traits. If you get into science or even torp build, you're going to see this stuff change a little bit, maybe even a little bit with tanking. But in terms of building out for DPS, energy weapons, those kinds of things, this is pretty much what you're going to see. This goes away sometimes if you're using like an Ox to Bat, because it's going to drain this every time you're using your Ox to Bat, which is basically constantly, and so it's pretty much worthless to have in there. And that would also be true with this console. That also works off of your auxiliary. If you're using Ox to Bat for your cooldowns, this becomes basically worthless for the critical chance, critical severity, because you're going to be draining your auxiliary constantly. Let's take a look at the stations. So for the first tactical, I have Torp Spread 1, since I have a torpedo in the front. I have Attack Pattern Beta for the debuff that it gives, an upgrade to our weapons. I was experimenting with this. This is a pilot ability. Depending on your ship, you may not have this ability here. What is this ability called? Does it even say here? Reroute Reserves to Weapons 1. So this is giving 2 self, power drain to 0 for our weapons, and plus 20%, or is that negative? No, it's 20% fire cycling haste for energy weapons, and then negative 10 engine power from emergency weapons activation. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but it sounds like it's taking some power from the engines, maybe? Instead of going to the weapons. I'm not sure what that means at the end. If you know what that means, please explain that to me. You guys have been doing a great job at doing that when I don't get something here. So I really do appreciate your guys' feedback when I ask those questions. So throw that in the comments if you know what that last bit is talking about. But I have it here for the reduced energy weapons cost and the firing cycle haste. This was not something I was using. I most likely would have beta 2 here, and then I would go torp spread 2 is most likely what I would do, and then I would find something in here, or I would just leave it and not use it. It's okay to, if you have, sometimes I have too many slots and I don't need them all, and it's okay to not use it if you don't have anything there. So I know it feels bad, but it is okay. But especially on the instant level, there's just not a lot you can put in there. I mean, you don't want to use copies of your main firing modes and things like that. That used to be a thing. I would not do that anymore. I mean, I guess you could use copies and not use Photonic Officer, but I would only use copies if you can fit matching copies. In any case, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. On the second Lieutenant Commander slot tactical, we have Tactical Team, which again, I'm not a big fan of. It can interfere with your fire cycle, so just be careful with that. But I had nothing else to put here, so that's why that's there. I'm using Chemocyte 2. This comes off the exchange. If I didn't have that, I would maybe use Omega, or I'd go Torp Spread 2 here and just leave this blank. And then I have Beam Overload 3. This is our main firing cycle ability. So on the written version of this, basically what I say is Beam Overload 3, or highest rank you can. Next in priority would be Beta, highest that you can fit in, and then your Torp Spread. Everything else, just fill in the gaps. Don't use copies of any of your firing modes. The other thing I could do on this ship, if let's say I didn't have this, is I could use rapid fire, because I have that cannon on the back. Or if this wasn't a pilot ship, I could use Beta 2 and Rapid Fire 1 here. So those are some other options where we could fill in some of the gaps and still be kind of complementing what's on the ship without going, making a hard right turn and going down some weird rabbit hole. Okay, so that's tactical. Engineering, I am using emergency power to engines, and again, like always, that is to proc the duty officer that allows recharge of evasive maneuvers. So when evasive maneuvers is done and I click emergency power to engines, that is going to recharge this ability, which is very nice for keeping movement up. So it drops down to about 4 seconds, and that's already ready to use again. I am using Let It Go. This comes from the Winter event store, and I'm using this mainly for the damage resistance debuff that it gives, 6.3 every second for 20 seconds. It also does cold damage over time as well. We are using emergency power to weapons 3. We are using reverse shield polarity for the resistance ratings that it gives for your shields and survivability. And then I really just didn't have anything else to put in here, so this has engineering team, which is nice to have if you get hit with boarding party or some sort of debuff from the enemy. This is nice to have. The priority on the engineering is going to be emergency power to weapons, and then emergency power to engines. The rest of it, fill it in with what you have. There could be more thought put into this where we could maybe come up with a better list of priorities, but I would stick to heals, maybe nothing else that's going to have a shared cooldown, because these two have a shared cooldown, so I have to kind of manage that, meaning if I click emergency power to engines in order to cool down my evasive maneuvers, it puts this on a 15-second shared cooldown. So that's something you need to pay attention to when you're managing these two things. But for my purposes and what I'm doing here, those two are my priorities. Number 1 being emergency power to weapons for the damage. Number 2 being emergency power to engines. And again, this can be of any rank. So if you happen to have, say, Let It Go, but you had grabbed it for a different build and it's on your ensign slot, slot it in your ensign slot and do your emergency power to engines in your lieutenant slot here. That's fine. You already have the ability, so just use it. I mean, it'd be better if it were rank 2, but if you don't have it, that's okay. And again, emergency power to engines, it's purely there just to proc that duty officer. So, sometimes you have to, use what you got, even if maybe it's not, best case in terms of the ranks, that's okay. It's still better than not using it. All right. Lastly, we have science. And we have hazard emitters. I have this in my spam bar because this is giving us an extra 3% critical chance from, I believe it's Strategist, every time we click that. Also, it's giving us a heal over time, which is always nice to have going. And then lastly, we have Photonic Officer, which is just a must-have if you're not using Ox to Bat. This is cooling down all our bridge officer abilities except for itself, 2% every second for 20 seconds. So this helps keep these, all of these abilities up. Not 100% of the time, but I don't know what the percentage would be, but I mean a lot. It's cutting these recharge times by almost in half on most of them. So if it's a 30-second recharge time, except for when this is on cooldown, it's generally taking a little more than half that to recharge it. So definitely a must-have if you do not have Oxtabat setup for your cooldowns. Priority-wise, Photonic Officer. You have to have, though, it's not available in the ensign slots. You have to have, like, let's say this was just an ensign science slot here. If that's all this was, this universal slot would now be science, and I would be using the Lieutenant Commander version of Photonic Officer. I would have to. And for my tactical, I'd have Beam Overload, Beta, and Torp Spread, and I'd be good to go. Actually, that's almost an option here, but I could get a lot better on the cooldowns if I had Photonic Officer in this slot. But in any case, I digress. That's not what I did on this, so we'll look at that another time. So that's Bridge Officer seating. Let's take a look at Duty Officers. Hopefully the loadouts on this all stayed properly. Ground, space. Okay, so here's our emergency con hologram. This is what is giving us that ability to recharge evasive maneuvers with emergency power to engines. This comes from the Phoenix boxes, which I'll just quickly show you. There's a whole video on this as well, but you can purchase Phoenix boxes from here with dilithium. Buying them in a 10-pack is the best way to go. I'll just buy one just for example, and nice, I got a very rare. So what you would do is, if you wanted that con officer, what you can do is you can break these down into smaller amounts. So for a very rare, you can get 2 of the rares, which is also where this guy comes from in the rare. So you'd have 2 of those, and you could purchase him. That's this one here. And then you could take the other one and break it into 2 of the greens, and you could grab some Phoenix upgrades with it. So that's how that works. I do have a whole video on Phoenix upgrades if you want to check that out. It's definitely the way to go for doing that. Why is my loadout all messed up now? Game crashed right in the middle of my video, and fix that. There we go. That was weird. All right, let's go ahead and jump into, we'll do a parsed ISA. This is going to be a pug run, see how this does, and then we'll come back and take a look at the numbers. here we are with the Parse. So that was a pretty decent run. We did 60K. Some of these other guys did very, very well. 60K on a all mission reward and crafted build is excellent. It's an excellent number in general. Now I know we'll see, people like Augie doing 1 million, or myself, scratching 600, on my paid account, and those are just crazy high numbers. But realistically speaking, if you're doing over 20, like this guy here in an ISA run, you're contributing and you're having a good time. If you're up doing 60, you're doing very, very well in helping the team progress through that TFO quickly. And pretty much any of the content in the game on advanced at 60K, you're doing good and you're having fun. This is definitely a viable build for you to be using to start with, and then to slowly upgrade to some of the higher level gear and build upon this. So this is a good starting platform where you can pick these up as you play through the missions and replay some of them so you can get the sets. This build is excellent. Let's just take a look at some of the breakdown here. How do we do on taking damage? So here we are. Attacks in. And it looks like this guy here was doing some tanking, or he was just attracting. It looks like he was definitely doing some kind of tanking build. So that definitely helped us a bit. We took very, very little damage, which is very nice of him. Let's take a look at the breakdown on the abilities here. So our phaser arrays under normal firing mode did almost 13K. We did almost exactly the same amount under beam overload 3. So our beam arrays, and these are our crafted beam arrays here, under normal firing mode and overload did 26K damage. So not bad there. The Quantum Phase Torpedo Spread 1 did 5K, not bad. Quantum Phaser Beam by itself, not under a firing mode, did 4.6K. Our pets did 4K, almost 4.5. We'll take a look at those in a moment. Trilithium Phaser Array, this is the Omni, it did 4.2. Trilithium Enhanced Phaser Array under Beam Overload 3 did almost 4. Quantum Phase Array under Beam Overload did 3. It's kind of weird. On most of this stuff, it almost did more damage under regular firing mode. That's not a knock on the Beam Overload. It's just the fact that depending on how your cooldowns are timing out and how I'm managing my spam bar, I tend to click it when I shouldn't. So what's happening is basically I'm getting less time around the enemy with that firing mode going. So I need to do a better job at managing that. So when I'm in transit, say from one side of the map to the other, I don't need to be clicking that. It's just habit to be tapping the space bar, and I really got to break that. Let's take a look at that turret. So that turret still did 3K damage. There's nothing proccing it. Now, granted, all the other beam arrays, they're slotted here twice, one under Beam Overload 3 and one just by itself. So basically, each of the other, directed beam weapons are twofers. So the Trilithium, if we did add in like Scatter Volley, or not Scatter Volley, but Rapid Fire, we'd probably see that same effect, and it essentially would have doubled the overall output of this weapon on average. So it's holding its own just in what it is, and we're getting that extra chance of that firing cycle proc. So definitely worth having that, even though it looks kind of weird having that turret in the back. And just so, excuse me, just for some reference, let's take a look at, I did Parse prior to that with having those 2 exchange items. I did about 7K more DPS there. And I don't know why I'm trying to upload that. That's not what we want. All right, so we're not going to see a lot difference here because the one console is giving us damage boost, so there's not a different line item for that. Here we have pets at the top, and that's because approaching Agony. This was a weird run too. This run was long. It was 3.5 minutes. It was kind of a disaster, but I'd be interested. I should probably run that again to get some better baselines. We could probably do a little bit better because, again, that was all over the place. I mean, in that build, I was the second, second place there, and we had some real low. So if we had a couple other, higher doing over 20, that would have moved along faster. And I'm guessing we could probably get into 80K on this build with having just those 2 exchange items that we discussed earlier. But the pets, we have the Nimbus Distress Call. That's also what's going to be in pets on the Parse that did not have the exchange items. Approaching Agony did very well. We were able to use that twice. Surprised we weren't able to use it more. I guess 3 minutes. It's got a 2-minute cooldown, so we're able to use that twice, and that netted us about 4K damage there. Photonic Fleet. This is a science character, so I have Photonic Fleet, and that's where these pets are coming from, along with the Nimbus Pirate Distress Call. I'd start off with all the loot drops. So you have the EC, pick up those other 2 items from the exchange, or work towards grabbing those to put on the ship here. These 2. And then start to add in your rep gear, your rep weapons. If you're picking up other ships with traits, add those in as well. Start getting your fleet consoles. Again, if you, I'll put a link in the description. It'll also be at the end of the video here for the advanced phaser build. And basically, it's next level of this same thing here. So here's your starting point, and you want to be working to the advanced level of your beam overload build. All right, well, I think that that takes care of it there. Definitely a viable build, all on mission drops and crafted items. I'm very happy with the way that turned out. I hope that was helpful to you. If you haven't already, please hit that sub button, ring the bell. I'd really appreciate that. It helps me out quite a bit. Also, as I stated at the beginning of the video, we have a giveaway going in the Discord server for 10 master keys. I will be adding another giveaway this month. I just need the coupons for tier 6 ships to be available for purchase in game. Once that happens, I will be adding one of those as well. Hoping this coming up weekend, that will be available. Also, I have added memberships for the channels. Take a look at those perks. There's some pretty cool stuff in there if you're so inclined. Take a look at that and see what you guys think. Again, I hope this was helpful. And until next time, guys, have a good one. Stay safe, and thank you for watching.